Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast. We have an amazing guest for you today. She's a rising star in the mortgage industry. She's a sales and marketing leader. She continues to bring new ideas, new methodologies to the industry. Please help me welcome Elena Gardner, Director of Sales and Marketing at Lodestar. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I think I should have you introduce me before everything.
Well, it is great to have you. You're doing some incredible stuff. Before we get started in talking all things marketing and sales and what's working in the market and conferences, tell our listeners, maybe the ones that don't know you, they haven't seen your rising star yet. How did you get into the industry? A little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I actually came from the hospitality industry. I was in the hospitality industry for 13 years, and then I like to make the joke selling private events during a pandemic, not the vibe. So I traded weddings for houses. So still a part of someone's major life event, but I'm very much okay. I've always been on the vendor side of things, and, switching industries. I think there's a lot of similarities between the hospitality industry and the mortgage space. And I've really enjoyed my time here. So I joined Lodestar just about 2 years ago, just over at this point. And Jim was so supportive and gave me opportunities that I think a lot of people wouldn't have taken the risk on some girl that, had never been in mortgage before, but he really let me have creative control, and it's been absolutely wonderful.
Well, and you're doing some amazing things. We're going to get into those in a few minutes, but you've been traveling to conferences. You've been talking to a lot of the people. What are some of the major challenges you see that lenders are facing in today's market?
I think one of the biggest things is when I came into the industry in 2020, the biggest argument was time, right? Is 21, all of that is I don't have time to invest in tech. And now it's I don't have money to invest in tech. So I think one of the biggest things is really recognizing that there's never going to be a perfect time to improve your processes, is one of the biggest challenges we're seeing. And we're really seeing banks and credit unions investing in their tech right now because they have other assets, right? So they have the money,
Right.
They have the time. Whereas IMBs are in a very different position. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that are facing IMBs right now is finding creative ways to invest in your tech stack, even if that means kind of front running some of the work now and implementing when that cash flow comes back in and volume comes back.
I love it, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I've seen that cycle so many times in the industry of volumes are way up, rates are down, there's all kinds of business, and they say, I don't have time, I'm way too busy. How could I ever implement something new? And then the market shifts, and it's typically not a gradual shift. It's a major quick shift. And then they're like, yeah, well, we have no money. We just made some cuts. And technology has to be leveraged to help them get out of the cycle that they're in. The biggest mistake I see a lot of companies make is they need more sales right now. So what do? They start cutting back on sales and marketing. Well, you might as well put an anchor on your leg and you're just going to go down faster. And we've seen that with a number of companies go out of business because they don't realize that one of the main sources of driving that new business is what they're doing in sales and marketing. And that's what I want to talk to you about, because I think you bring such a fresh perspective. You bring new ideas. Let's first talk about, I've seen you at some of the recent events. Talk to me about the importance of leveraging both digital and live events and in-person events, and kind of give me your perspective on the two.
Yeah, I think both are important in their own ways. There is nothing that can beat being in person with someone and having those conversations, right? I came from the events industry. I may be a little biased. I'll fully acknowledge that. But at the same time, I've had some of the best conversations, the best connections made, being in person. And that's not to say that every trade show is valuable, because you do have to figure out which ones are valuable for you, continue to invest in those, and the ones that aren't working, stop spending money on them. Maybe you go from a booth to just sending a single salesperson to have some meetings. Or even if you're sending someone, you're not seeing value out of it, pull back completely. You don't have to be everywhere. And I think that's really important to recognize when it comes to trade shows. And then for online and like webinar content and podcasts and all of that, I think that's so important. So much of podcasts is honestly just name recognition, brand recognition, right? But webinars, I think, are really where you can provide the most value to your customers as well as prospects about why your product works, why they should want it, and really provide some additional education pieces that you're not going to necessarily see at a trade show because you're bouncing from
Right.
meeting to meeting to meeting.
Well, and I think one of the things that I have found, especially when COVID hit, everyone dove into digital.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, I don't want to say COVID's done, or I guess it is officially done now, depending on
Yeah.
people are now back at live events. And I think the one mistake I see people make is they've gone from one extreme to the other. We're in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of COVID. We do all digital. We now are done with COVID. So now we're going to do all in person. And what I found during COVID is for people that leaned in and did digital right, whether it's with the webinars, whether it's with the podcast, whether it's just with social and engagement, I have found that when I now go to conferences, because of what I'm doing on digital and because I'm still interacting with digital, those relationships are a lot stronger. The ease at which you can get meetings set up and you just say, hey, DM me here, you're connecting with people. Now you're almost meeting with a dear friend, even if you've never met them in person, because of all of that interaction digital. So, what's your take on the swing of some people going to extremes of all just in person, all digital? Do you think it's important to leverage both at the same time?
Oh, 100%. Very early on when I joined the industry, I was attending a session and someone said, you should be posting about every single in person event you go to. And I think that's so important. I'm not great about it. It's tough, it's hard, but you really need to recognize that one, you are then taking that in person conversation that you had, that connection that you made, and moving it online, right? So it kind of
Yep.
grows the trust that you have with some of those lenders, with some of those people, right? Because you're interacting with them online. And at the end of the day, we all know LinkedIn is kind of, it's a professional game, right? You're trying
Yep.
to expand your reach, and everyone else is trying to expand their reach. And everyone kind of knows that. Whereas I think on some other social media platforms, it can kind of become this parasocial relationship. Whereas on LinkedIn,
Yep.
we all know what we're there for, right? And I think that's important too, is building that connection and having that conversation with people. And, you know, some of my favorite people started off as comments on their LinkedIn posts, right? Is supporting them, supporting their projects and all of that. And then when we get in person, it's so much more exciting because we have that front ground running is already done, right? We have a little bit more
Exactly.
of
I
a personal relationship.
couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's so many ways that you can foster and grow the relationship online. And then when you do meet in person, you're now gone up 2, 3, 4 rungs of the ladder and you feel like you already know them, you know their family, you know the stuff that they like, and it makes those personal interactions so much more powerful. Now let's talk about,
Mm-hmm.
you came from the event space. I think you bring a fresh perspective to it. Talk to me about, because I think the days of just showing up for every trade show, here's the 5, here's the 10 trade shows we have to go to, let's do a booth. Some shows a booth is good for. I'm not bashing all
Mm-hmm.
shows, and you've got to pick and choose. But what are other ways that you can engage and make it a very memorable experience without just doing the same thing that everyone's done? I got a booth. I didn't get a great space. I got a good space. There was traffic. There wasn't traffic in the exhibit hall. What are some of the things that you have found to be very effective to kind of create that experience at these shows?
I think there's a couple things you can do, right? So for us, for example, we are a pretty low budget marketing company. I'll be 100% honest. People hit me up for marketing deals all the time. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. We're small business, all of that. So one thing that we did for the experience show for ICE last year is we did a toiletry kit, basically. So it was we had liquid IV and ibuprofen and Tums and deodorant, which was a hot top seller. That cost us very little, honestly. And in comparison to some other things we could have done. And we had people come back day after day for things. Wednesday morning, we got hit up for all the liquid IV. We got hit up for all the ibuprofen. And that sort of thing, that you provide someone a touch point to come back to and a reason to come back to your booth, is really important. I've seen some people do like pressed leather goods or anything like that. So I would encourage you, if you're going to do a booth, do it big. And if you're not going to do it big, don't do a booth. You don't need to have a 6-foot table with your logo on it and nothing else, right?
Right.
And I think that's important. And then kind of on the other end of things, I know a lot of people spend money on the ice show, so this is kind of the example I'm going to use, is Lender Toolkit throws a supercar event. That is so memorable. So many people know about it. They get press to come out, drive the supercars. That's a cool thing, right? And that really brings someone home with a memory of, I got to go to Vegas and I got to do this. So if you can provide a unique experience to your clients on the road, it doesn't have to be something that massive. But
Right.
instead of going to another dinner, do you do a brewery tour? Right? Like,
See, I love that how you're coming up with different ways. And one thing that I hear a lot of executives, and I'm sure you've dealt with this as well. Well, what does that kit have to do with our brand? What does that have to do with what Lodestar does or what NexLevel does or whatever it may be? So how do you kind of overcome that objection from executives who are wondering, well, great, you're giving them this little kit and that's great. I'm glad they came back. But how does that tie into what we do in the mortgage industry?
well, for us, we added a little tagline for Lodestar has you covered, right? Is it ties into the fact that we have a 100% fee guarantee. We have our lenders back when it comes to cures, right? For Lender Toolkit, they did the speed of AI for their race car event. So I think it's really, as marketing professionals, our jobs to come up with ideas that relate. They don't have to be super close, but they need to kind of fall in line a little bit with what you're doing. So it does make sense, right?
Exactly.
But, you know, but you can come up with a marketing tagline for anything. So really, it's just, how can you tie your creative idea back into the brand? And when you present it to your executive team, make sure you have that concept tied together already, so it looks like you've already thought about it.
Well, and that's such a great tip. And it's one of those steps that I think a lot of times people just assume that they're going to make the connection and they don't. And if you're pitching it, then pitch your idea. Here's the connection. You also talked about making memorable experiences. And I think that is so critical. And you being in hospitality, whether it's a wedding or whether it's somebody getting their keys to their house, how do you go about doing that? Especially if you say we don't just have an unlimited budget. And especially in today's market, even very, very large lenders and vendors are saying, we don't want the appearance of we're just being frivolous with our money. So how do we create a memorable experience on a cost-effective budget?
I think it's important to, one, look at what your clients like. At this point, I think every executive in the mortgage industry has been to a steak dinner. And if you haven't, I'm sorry, you've been robbed. But it's true. And while there are unique spaces, right, there are unique steakhouses at some of these venues and all of that. My team, we go to a team dinner at SW every year when we're in Vegas, right? But we do that for our team. And I think that's kind of some of the places that you can maybe look to make some cuts is, do we want to spend $3,000 on a dinner for our clients? Or could we spend $3,000, rent out a space, do something fun, and get people engaged? I'm actually a big proponent against client dinners because I think a lot of times it traps people for 3 hours. You're competing with so many things. And sometimes it can be really great. There are some companies that it works really well for, but for us, we're a side service, right? And I think that's important to recognize for a lot of vendors in this space is, if you're a third-party vendor, you're not their biggest talking point of the conference. So how can you capture them for a valuable and short amount of time?
I love that. I think there's some great insights there. And there is a time and a place for some of those client dinners and everything. But to your point, and I think where I've seen people fail the biggest in those is when they will rent a boat.
Yes.
Well, then you're literally stuck for 3 hours, right? I mean, and I saw this happen a number of years ago, and I won't name the companies, but one company invited a lot of people, their boat dock was to the right, and another company invited a bunch of people and their boat dock was to the left. Well, the one on the left was about 3 times bigger. And
Oh,
it looked like the boat on the right was just a little dinghy that people were going to go float around. It did not work. It failed for that company. And so I totally agree with you on that. Let's talk about, we're covering so many topics and I want to cover a few
yeah.
more. Talk to me about some of the other tools that you think are very effective to help drive sales and marketing. Are you using AI? Is email dead? How are you leveraging social, podcasts? Give me kind of your take on some of those hot topics.
I think something that's so important that we've really seen be a big driving piece to our marketing tool is kind of creating a brand voice that represents the company. So, creating a brand voice, so when you interact with the brand, you're interacting with a very similar piece to what our sales team looks like. So, it's consistent once you get from marketing to sales. And that means fun things. We're people. We create a mortgage cartoon every week. So if you subscribe to our weekly newsletter, you get a cartoon about the mortgage industry every week in your email box. And that came out of something of one of my employees was like, hey, I think I can do this. Will you let me try? Right. And I think so many times our employees have great ideas, and even our lowest level marketing consultants have great ideas. We should be asking the newest people on our team, especially in marketing, for what crazy idea do they have? And does that make sense for our business? Because honestly, the comic strip has performed really well for us. And it's something that I don't think anyone would be like, yeah, this is a great idea.
Right. But I think that openness and that willingness to try it is critical. What's your take on AI and some of the AI tools that are out there?
I actually just messaged my marketing, my social media person this morning about Chat GPT. I saw a beautiful video basically outlining an entire schedule where Chat GPT had done all of the social media posts, emojis, everything, tags, photo generation for 2 different platforms. So had customized for the brand from LinkedIn or from Instagram to Twitter. I think there's a lot of benefits of AI, and I think as marketers, we should be playing with it. I think we would be silly to ignore it. Obviously, for lenders, there's compliance issues and all of that, so you want to be a little careful. But as vendors, we have a little bit more freedom, and I think we should really be play testing it, seeing where it works, where it doesn't, and then we need to come back to it in a year. So figure out what works for your business now, take that with you, and then come back, review it. It's going to get better consistently and quickly. So we really need to be reviewing our tech stacks. I review my tech stack every single year. That might be a little crazy, but at the end of the day in marketing, the next great thing is out there, and it will be out there soon.
See, I agree. And I'm a big believer in AI. And I think one of the biggest hurdles is everyone's like, it's going to take everyone's job. It's going to do this. And really what I have found with whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's some of the graphic generators that you can use AI and a number of other tools, I think it's going to benefit the people who ask smart and intelligent questions and actually know the space. And the example I always give is Chat GPT can write code. Well, guess what? I'm not a coder and I'm not a programmer. So Chat GPT for me to write a code and have something worthwhile isn't going to work. And 100%. The same thing for marketing and sales. If you know marketing and sales and you know your target audiences, then you can ask much better prompts and you know your brand voice. Then chat, I can find, say, hey, I can get this twice as much done or 3 times as much done. But it's the people that are very knowledgeable in their subject matter expertise that I think are going to leverage those tools and really explode. I don't think it's going to give the average person who really doesn't know how to market this big leg up on how to market, or the person who doesn't know how to write code, not going to write code with Chat GPT or any of the other tools. So that's kind of where I see some of the AI tools going. Tell us, you've got so many great insights. You and I could keep talking for a while, but I want to make sure, Tell us what's new and exciting. What's coming up for Lodestar? What are you guys working on? What's really getting
Oh
a lot of
gosh.
traction in the market right now?
Yeah, I mean we're actually planning quite a bit. So it's our 10-year anniversary this year, so we're gonna kick that off in.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I can take very little credit for it, only the last 3 years. But I will be doing a lot around the 10-year anniversary. We're going to kick it off in August by tearing apart our old marketing. So we're going to use a Wayback Machine, go through our old websites, and really just let Jim have it about how we think everything is bad. And then hopefully we'll be doing some exciting things for MBA Annual. It's in Philadelphia this year, which is our hometown.
Yes.
Our entire team is in Philly, so we're really excited about that. And season 4 of our podcast. Honestly, we'll be kicking that off in Labor Day. So it's a little bit away. We just wrapped up season 3. But I'm really excited. It's really grown, and I'm really happy Jim brought me on as the second host last year. And decided to share the space. So it's been really fun for me for the last year, just really getting to talk to so many amazing people. I've gotten to do some great interviews. Sarah Wheeler from Housing Wire and Rob Chrisman and Lori Brewer were some of my favorites from last season from Simple Nexus. So I'm really excited to kind of see who I get to interview this next year. I do most of my interviews on the road, so I get to do them in person, which is great.
Fantastic. So for those listening, I'm a big proponent of other people and their podcast and the great insights that they share. What is the name of the podcast? Where can people find it?
So it is Lodestar's Lending Leaders. You can find it on Apple, Spotify. We also do a video podcast, so you can find it on YouTube. And if you sign up for any of our email newsletters, we email it out every Thursday with a write-up. So if you're not into listening, we do summarize it for you in about 250 words.
I love it. Lena, you're doing so many incredible things. It's great to see your star shine. I love watching what you're doing. Can't wait to see some of the new things that you do. For people that want to find out more about Lodestar, what you guys are doing, maybe just to pick your brain, or maybe they want to be a guest on your podcast, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Elena Gardner, or you can email me at agardner@lssoftwaresolutions.com. I'm almost always on LinkedIn though, so if that's easiest for you, you'll get a message back pretty promptly.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for being a guest on this episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast.
Thank you.